Hey guys, you're watching Vol, how you going? Yesterday I played a game of Infinity at the 400 points level, up from 300, which is the standard size, so a bit of a bigger game. It was Vanilla Combined Army against the Neo Terra Capitoline Army, NCA. My buddy Jason, aka the Admiral, a fairly well-known NCA player in our parts. So the mission was Annihilation top tier, and I understand that the intention, although we didn't really talk about it, is probably so that it could be recorded on one of the theaters in Strike Zone Wotan. I've gone off Strike Zone Wotan now. I don't really think I'll be participating much in that campaign unless things change. We'll deal with that in a different video. But it was a good opportunity to play a game of a bit of a bigger size, and I don't mind playing Annihilation. It's just not one of my favorite missions. I want to start out by talking about that. So when we think Annihilation, I think some people assume that Annihilation is almost like the absence of a mission. It's just kill your opponent, and that's really all there is to it. But it's more complicated than that. I actually think that Annihilation is just a bit of a weirder mission even than simple missions like Quadrant Control and Seize the Antennas, and it can be very difficult to accomplish relative to what one might think. If you take a mission like Firefight, that is more like an Annihilation mission, because if you kill even 1 point more than your opponent kills from your lineup, you get a massive wad of points. Whereas Annihilation is based into these little categories, and that is what makes it technical and difficult. I sometimes make the joke that the mission known as Annihilation should be renamed to Slightly Classified, because it's all about the one classified objective you've got to get a lot of the time. Whereas the mission known as Highly Classified should probably be renamed to Annihilate the Specialist, because that's what you're doing in that game. You're ignoring really how much stuff dies, but you're trying to eliminate their doctor and engineer and fort observers and hackers before they can actually complete the classifieds. I feel like sometimes this mission can be a little bit similar. Bear in mind, when we talk about the categories here, the windows, this is with 400 points, bear in mind, so it's changed a little bit for that. What I want to say about Annihilation is that when it comes to Corvus Belli's design, I find that parts of their design philosophy are still a little bit backward, still a little bit stuck in the days of Warhammer Fantasy, Warhammer 40k, where back then it was okay to have a draw. A win only meant beating your opponent by a very large margin, and anything within a narrower category was just, a good game between mates. What we have now in 2017 is a scene where there are lots of different strategy games out there, and war games and tabletop games, and people like to play competitively, and people like to feel that if they've outplayed their opponent even by a little bit, they should get credit for that. And if the game is considered a draw, even when it felt like there was an outcome, that can be an anticlimax to a lot of people. But sadly, Annihilation does result in draws sometimes. I say that because each player has one classified objective worth 2 objective points, which they can both easily get. You might be able to get a dial scan or a telemetry or a test run or something off fairly straightforwardly, or you may be able to swap it for the HVT. But to win on the main mission objectives, you need to actually kill a lot of stuff and retain a lot of stuff at the same time. So if you hold on to all of your every single model in your list, and you wipe out every single model of mine, then you've got 10-0, assuming you classify it as well, and I don't. But you can sort of see that if I am left with 101 points left of models and you have 199, according to this, it's not really a victory, and in fact it will come down to the classified objectives. Now you may be thinking, okay, sure, I've played a lot of games of Annihilation and I've seen a lot of real bloodbaths and it's gone either way. But I want to talk about a situation where you're playing against someone who knows what they're doing, understands that they can't afford to give away a lot of casualties, and may start playing for the draw if they realize they're losing. So you can picture that, can't you? You've got somebody with a lot of points worth of models tied up in camo marker state, in total cover. The game table is littered with crazy koalas and mines and repeaters and chain rifle templates on very cheap warbands and auxiliary bots that don't really cost anything. So if your opponent realizes that they can get Rambo'd to death, they may just bunker up. And that's what I expect a lot of people to do in missions like this. Now, of course, if you see an opportunity to just break away and win with a Rambo, then sure, you should take it. But the penalty for sending an expensive model across the board and failing to net a lot of points with it is that your opponent just nails that model and gets that points and then sits back. Ironically, even though I say that taking second turn is better for missions where you have to jump onto the objectives at the end of the game and do that without retaliation, sometimes it's better to have second turn in Annihilation as well, just because there's no risk of the opponent getting another active turn to have a go at you if it's the last turn in the game and you're moving out to attack at that point. So that can be quite good. But generally when I play a mission like this, my focus is just laser dead centered on getting that classified objective, preventing my opponent from getting his or hers if possible, and then playing for a draw on the points. And if I can't achieve that, then I'd either take some risks to avoid a loss or to potentially get a win if I was not that far away from it. I hope that makes sense. So for 400 points, we've got a combined army list here, which I'll talk you through. My lieutenant is the anathematic hacker, who has a regular hacking, well, a EI hacking device which has Sucker Punch. The reason why I wanted the anathematic is because you can afford him a bit more easily at 400 points. I want a lieutenant that's not going to die, because the larger the scale of the game gets, the worse it is for you when something affects your entire army. So when you're lost a lieutenant and the entire army is irregular, that hurts even worse than it does when, say, you're playing at 100, 200 points, and there are still things you can get done with models here and there, whereas at 400 points, you kind of need to get a bit more oomph into your turn. So the anathematic lieutenant's probably the safest lieutenant in the game, in the sense that it can use Marker State, it's got 3 wounds, it's got the armor BTS, and it's got Mnemonica for transferring the lieutenant back to something else like a Unidron. So that's that. The other reason for taking him is that he's 88 points inside a deployment zone TO camo marker, so he's a lot safer and he actually retains a big chunk of points. That's 88 points my opponent's never going to get unless I make a mistake, or unless I've got some strategy of really committing to removing him, which is quite hard. So that means that it's very unlikely I'm just going to get totally steamrolled with the anathematic hanging around, because he's so resistant to any pushes in to assassinate him. The next model on the list is the Overdron. I take the 57-point heavy rocket launcher. It adds some more template weapons at long range in the list. It's really great against MSV for the albedo. And again, you've got a model that can provide a few AROs, but if he gets shot at, he's armor 9 behind cover, and you can repair him with the MedTech Obsidon, Dr. Worm. So again, in this scenario, you're retaining a wad of points, you're providing a little bit of teeth to your list, you have a little bit of a threat, but you don't have to commit him, you can just keep him alive. My Shrouded is an assault hacker. Now, what I recommend is that in lower points games, assault hacking may be not as relevant, because your opponent is less likely to have things that can be hacked at lower points. They're going to be shying away from spending a lot of points on expensive models that can be hacked. But at 400 points, you should start to expect more heavy infantry, more likelihood of a tag, maybe a lot of remotes running around. Who knows? That's why I take a hacker. And the Shrouded hacker, I mean, doesn't need to be a forward observer except for telemetry classified. He's not pressing buttons. But the EI assault hacking device also has stop. I actually think that it's really, really useful. Elsewhere in the list, we've got a Malignos hacker. Similar reason, and if my opponent sees the camo marker on one side of the table and figures it out that I've got an assault hacker, that player might assume to take the other direction, in which case they'll run into the Malignos and hidden deployment on the other side. 2 Datcherites are standard, just basic smoke generating guys. Even though I have no MSV in this list at all, these guys are just so useful for blocking fire lanes and getting to close combat and providing defense with their chain rifle. They have to be taken with the cheerleader ability especially. Crack Up Renegade, sometimes he just sits there on the table doing nothing all game, that's fine. He can afford deployment level 1 on top of a roof and be safe. But occasionally he rolls up a really useful metachemistry and can go attack them, and if you can trade a 15-point model for a 40-point chunk of troops or something like that, then he's definitely well worth it in this sort of mission. Unidrone, sometimes I don't take these guys, but this guy will be useful with the anathematic, providing Mnemonica back to the Unidrone, making him a higher whip, and as a forward observer, he's my one model I can fall back on if I absolutely have to complete the telemetry. R-Drone, Cheerleader, Medtech, obviously they're wanting to conserve points, keep things alive. The Q-Drone has an HMG. I have been taking the plasma rifle a lot at the moment, but I tend to take the HMGs when I have the short range stuff pretty well covered, and when I'm not planning on doing a lot of sort of Rambo runs into their territory, if I'm expecting a pretty staunch defense. Group 2 has the Malignos Hacker, two Predators. The Predators are what make Vanilla Combined quite strong in my opinion. They're really, really useful for suicide runs and defense as well. They've got a really good arsenal, which we talk about more in bat reps themselves. Imetron, obviously. The Noctifier missile launcher. Sometimes I take the Spitfire instead, but this game is the missile launcher because, again, I'm expecting the deployment zone to have more enemy models in it because it's more points, a larger likelihood of a heavy infantry model or a tag coming across the fire lane, so that's why the missile launcher is going to be a bit more valuable, and I've got other things which can fulfill the role of that Spitfire. So that's a list. I think it's about time we got onto the game, so let's bring it up and we'll talk about it. So before the game starts, I always like to take photographs of where my hidden deployment models are. This is the Malignos Hacker. This is looking at my right-hand flank on top of a building. He's prone, just underneath the staircase, waiting for models to come down this alley here. So enemy deployment zone is up that direction. There's one way around to my right-hand flank here, and this takes you towards the center. This fork in the road is going to be within zone of control of this hacker if anything comes down there. There's only one fire lane on the table which stretches between the deployment zones, so I've positioned my Noctifier there. Because it's the one line that we're both trying to control, you can faintly see in the distance there is a box here. My opponent actually has a Hexa sniper in hidden deployment at the exact opposite spot that my Malignos is, sorry, my Noctifier is, and later on you'll be seeing that he's setting up not only that, but a missile launcher in a Fusilier Link team there as well. Reason for that is that he wants me to get into a position where I'm trying to attack the missile launcher, only to face more than I bargained for with another arrow as well. I've very carefully tried to create a bit of a line here where I'm keeping my Dacharatsi and Preta and Krakot and Imetron just outside of the fire lane itself, because I don't want them to get attacked when they use Impetuous. A bit of a bigger view of it. So right hand flank, you just saw the fire lane along here, you just saw that the Noctifier is there. We've got the Krakot at this position here. He has rolled +3 physical and regeneration for his metachemistry. Not my favorite result, but it's workable. Imetron lands successfully. We've got the the Dacharatsi with a Preta backing him up, the Ikadron in the corner. There is a Unidron here. I like to put this little white base just to show that he's touching the wall, whereas the gun just sort of hits the wall. Can't really do that angled correctly. The reserve model was my Overdron with HRL there, heavy rocket launcher. We've got a camo marker which represents, a cellular token which represents my Anathematic, which is prone. Drone back behind the wall here, and on this side of the table we've got the shrouded camo marker, also prone with hacking device. Left-hand side of the battlefield, we've got another Predator ready to move out. The HVT is situated here. Dacharatsi, again, we've got the Q-Drone HMG with behind him, he's got a Dr. Worm and a Nikadron, which you can't really see pictured there, so that's pretty much my entire army. On my opponent's side, so this is looking from the right-hand side to the left, so right-hand as shown down here, this is the right-hand flank. We've got a flashpole spot. There is an Auxilia guy with an Auxilia bot situated here. I want to pause here and just talk about the problem with this deployment that we realized later. As you can see, this Auxilia is just poking around the side of the blue box, so if I'm shooting from this angle, he's going to get total cover from that, but along this line here, he doesn't have total cover. There's actually a line if I was able to draw straight through here. Now, he's not seeing any template weapons on the field, like rocket launchers or missile launchers yet, but he doesn't realize that I've got a Noctifier in hidden deployment and a heavy rocket launcher in reserve. So placing that model there will allow me to actually land a template which does clip the missile launcher, allowing me a way to attack that missile launcher without having to actually face-to-face him directly. And not only that, when the Hexa sniper shows up, he wouldn't really want to show up at the time when I'm laying down the template, would he? Because then the hex actually voluntarily gets hit by the template, so that's going to become a difficulty for his deployment. Back to the deployment itself, though, we've got a link team. So this is the hacker here. This is the missile launcher. This, I presume, is just a normal Fusilier. Same with this one, and we've got a some other kind of specialist there. And this model up here is a Tech B. Over here, there's a sensor bot. Behind the crates, we've got the Diva Spitfire. There's another flash pulse or some kind of bot there, Bulleteer way in the background. There's also a couple of CSUs, which you can't see very easily. And back here somewhere, there's a TO camo marker, a hidden deployment Swiss Guard, I should say. So in the middle, you can see a bit of a better view of this. We've got a Palbot here, we've got the Diva Spitfire, we've got a couple of regular robots at this position. This is the Bulleteer here. You've got the other Auxiliary team situated like that. There's another helper bot there. Oh, so not helper bot, it's the normal Pano remote, whatever it is. His HVT is here, all right? And the Warcore is prone on top of the box, and what he's doing with his hand in the photo here is he's placing his reserve model, which is a Locust boarding shotgun with drop bears. Here he is here, so this is a look just directly from his left hand flank looking along, so that's where he is prone. I should say that he won the lieutenant role. He chose to pick table side, and I decided to pick first turn. The reason I did that is that I wanted to be a bit more comfortable, because I didn't like the idea of him really committing hard. Not that I see that much from that particular opponent, but I didn't like the idea of a really, really solid commitment of a full 8 to 10 orders on something like a Squallow or a Rambo from a Garuda or a Swiss Guard or something like that, or Bulleteer that finds a chink in the deployment and manages to bust through somehow. So I wanted to sort of see what I was up against and correct my deployment issues with the first turn and really just get ready for a long game, and that's why I went for first turn, although second turn sometimes is more comfortable in this sort of case. It's my first turn, so Impetuous, the Krakot moves around, not the Krakot, the Datcherite moves around, throws a smoke grenade, which allows the Predator to advance under the cover of smoke without getting hit by a flash pulse from the Warcore. That same Warcore, though, it does have line of sight to the Datcherite, say, on the other side of the battlefield, who summarily fires his flash pulse and just misses because he can't get past the mimetism. We also have a Predator over here able to move around. Now, this is the point in the game where I decided to move out with my heavy rocket launcher, and it was not contentious at all that this model here, way in the distance, this Palbot, can be seen if the tag moves to here and then pulls back again in that first short skill. So shooting the rocket launcher hits the Palbot directly twice, and the Fusilier HMG has to dodge, fails that, and takes 2 heavy rockets to the face. So it was a bit of a setback to my opponent, but got a little bit lucky because he passed both armor saves for the heavy rocket launcher, and he doesn't even have to take a guts check, I'm told anyway, because he wasn't attacked directly by the heavy rocket launcher and could never see him, so he doesn't need to go to total cover because it's from the point of attack. So my opponent got off a little bit lightly there after making a little bit of a mistake, but it wasn't a massive blunder. He didn't know that I had templates like that. He just could have accounted for me potentially having them a bit better, is I think the only thing that could be said about that. So I now still have to try and deal with this missile launcher somehow. So the way we're going to do that is the Predator is going to come around the side here, and he's come up the stairs a little bit while prone. And in fact, I'm going to change the color of this pen, so we're going to grab this pen instead. He's coming up the stairs a little bit here, and just getting ready to enact an order where, for spinning a new order, he can move out and get within chain rifle range. So the plan is to actually move 6 inches over to here. 6-inch speed is one of the reasons why I rate Predators so highly. It allows them to get into combat and chain rifle range a lot better. You can't see it, but behind this part of the yellow building, the missile launcher model is around about there. Okay. So what happens next is the Predator is able to move around. We'll take the camera out of the way so we can see. So here's the Predator here. The missile launcher is here. He's standing up. So what happens is the chain rifle goes off because he declares a dodge instead. Note that this bot here fires at me with his combi rifle. My thinking here is that if he does dodge and if he does fail a guts check also, it gets the missile launcher out of the fire lane so I can start doing other things with my turn. what ends up happening is the Predator does take a single wound, goes into Dogged, and the missile launcher survives for whatever reason. I believe does end up going and ducking behind the crate. So that's where we're at. I still have a couple of orders left though, so what the Predator is able to do now is move along the wall, and quite importantly I want to say that the Predator has climbing plus, so what the Predator is allowed to do is to walk along to this point here and then climb up a little bit along there so that it can get line of sight to quite a few different models here with its chain rifle template. Now, my opponent was arguing here that to shoot at the missile launcher which is on the ground, I'd have to angle it downwards so much that I wouldn't be able to touch these models with the template. And I had to give him the benefit of the doubt there, because it's physically impossible to actually put your template through the table like it was a computer program in a simulation and just see how much stuff I could touch. So without being able to do that, I just said, fine, that's okay. I'll put the template touching these other models over here. So that's what happened. Now, the Link team dodges. I get shot at again, but the shots don't completely take down the Predator, so we have another go at it at this point. So the Predator again comes around, and this time the Predator comes into close combat with the Fusilier, giving me the opportunity to make a close combat attack depending what arrows are chosen. So he's able to delay with 6th Sense level 2. In the previous order I have destroyed the Auxiliar, so I'm now going to get shot at by everything else. But he declares, I think, a Flash Pulse with the Flash Pulse bot, a dodge with the Fusiliers, and shooting with everybody else back there. So I decided to lay down a chain rifle template because it would allow me to hit the missile launcher and his hacker and the Flash Pulse bot as well. There was something that happened at this point of the game, and the photos won't show what happened, but I just want to tell a bit of a story about something that came up, which I found interesting. My opponent declared a dodge, so the missile launcher dodges and the hacker dodges. So he makes a dodge roll for both, and if they fail, he makes an armor save for both. But what he did is he picked up 2 dice and says, okay, as they lie, it's for the missile launcher and the hacker, and throws them both and says, okay, that's the result. And at that point, I said, that's cool, but would it be okay if we roll the dice one at a time? Now, there was a misunderstanding there. There was an innocent misunderstanding. I wasn't trying to have a go at him or cause trouble, and he wasn't trying to have a dig at me, understanding what I understand now. But my opponent thought I was trying to say that those dice rolls shouldn't have counted, or that we should take back the roll, or anything like that. All I was saying is that I was concerned about if we're going to be rolling dice that way, it might come about that the dice roll in such a way that both of them land equally distant to that model and to this model, and it just wouldn't be immediately apparent whether this dice applies to the missile launcher or whether it applies to the HMG, so the hacker, or the other way around. If you can see what I'm saying, because what he was doing is he was just doing a shortcut really to throw both dice at the same time and say, okay, well this one lands near the missile launcher, so that was a 14, it fails, and this is a 9, hits the hacker, so he dodges. And as it was rolled, it was very clear what the result was, and I didn't contest the result at all. That was fine. But it was just a concern to me that if that was going to become the convention, I would have been more comfortable with 2 dice of different color being rolled, like a blue dice and a red dice, and okay, red for the hacker and we roll it, or just 1 dice being rolled at a time, because it doesn't take any extra effort to do that. But there was a bit of a verbal misunderstanding there, but we moved on, and you know, we took the results of the dice, and I wasn't disputing those at all, so I'm glad we got past that, but it was an interesting thing that cropped up. What does crop up though is I think I did manage to destroy the missile launcher by the end of it, but the Predator is removed from the table. Hacker does survive. So elsewhere in the scene, let's just draw a picture. So because I'm worried about some sort of shotgun coming around here from the Locust, I'm trying to spread out a little bit. So the Predator is coming up the stairs, going prone. The Krakot is up the stairs, and the Krakot's going to end up moving around here later on because, again, I'm concerned about shotguns at this point. But the Overdrawn has got an angle along the line through the alleyway across there, through to that side, and he's got an angle to protect me through here. He's got a little bit of an angle across here, and if anybody tries to get to him, we've still got the shrouded assault hacker protecting him there, so I'm comfortable with his position. Okay, so the lieutenant order is spent on the anathematic hacker, which is luckily able to give assisted fire to the Q drone. So here's the Q drone here, and there's the war core over here. Now I'm trying to destroy the war core, needing 8s to hit because it's long range but ignoring cover, and he's shooting back at long range up against mimetism, so he decides to dodge. And after spending, I think, 3 orders, I still didn't kill the war core. So it was a bit frustrating to not get lucky enough to just kill a war core with an HMG like that. But these things happen, and it wasn't a crucial moment in the game. I just felt that it was a bit disappointing I couldn't do much more with my turn, having to burn so many orders doing that. I wanted to free this up, though, because for me to have any opportunity to do any devastating Rambo attack later in the game, I'd have to sort of clear the way first, so I'm not wasting orders actually taking out something like that. I want all 10 orders in a later turn to go ahead. Alright, so it's his turn now, and a Swiss Guard is moving out in the form of a camo marker, who started in hidden deployment. And so he's moving, I'll get the camera out of the way, from his deployment zone around here, and his plan is to get out to a spot around about here because he needs to shoot at the Overdrawn, which is controlling this fire lane right now, if you guys can appreciate that. So that's where he's got to, spending the first couple of orders. In the next photo, you can see I've already pre-drawn a few things. This is a point of the game where I want to slow things down. I want to spend a bit more time talking because an interesting situation came up which I think a lot of people can learn from, and if you aren't an expert on Infinity, it might be worth slowing down and getting your head around the situation. I'm going to pause the battle report for a second and just say that on the forums I've made a post called Declaring Delay from HD, and that's not really an accurate description of the rules question. It's really about something else. But on the video description for this YouTube video, I've linked this forum thread, and I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to pause the video, have a read of the question I pose in the thread and the responses as well, at least on the first page, and get an understanding of the context and what the community consensus is on this particular issue that arises. Then come back to watch the rest of the video. Even if you can't be bothered reading it, I'm going to go through this verbally anyway, but I just think it would be good context while watching this video to see what other people thought about this situation. So now I'm going to come back to the battle report, and we're going to go through exactly what's going on. So we're currently in the NCA player's turn. The Swiss Guard is not a model, it's a marker at the beginning of the order. We spend a regular order to activate the Swiss Guard, and a short skill move is declared to this position noted in the photo. Now, we know that there's a Malignos assault hacker in hidden deployment, and it's sitting there prone behind that wall. In fact, if we were to just close this down and go back to the start, let's have a look at this picture. You can see it from the other angle. There's a prone marker clearly next to him. The Malignos is right there, so that's the position he's in, and he's just waiting for this. This is exactly what he's been hoping for, right? So my opponent is expecting an arrow from the Overdrawn, which is shown by the red arrow, and he's hoping that I'll delay and then shoot him, and he'll blast me with 4 dice at BS15 and surprise shot. But my arrow from the Overdrawn is a Discover, which is an unusual arrow. It's a little bit of a silly one if you look at it that way. But before that was declared, as my opponent's moving across, I said to him, the marker, the TO camo marker, is that using stealth. And I want you guys to understand that all camo markers have the stealth rule innately. They all have access to that. Not only is marker state optional, but stealth is optional. So if you want to, you're allowed to declare that your Swiss Guard's moving out and you're just dropping marker state completely. You're allowed to separately declare that you're dropping stealth completely, the different rules. So these are options. Some people think that those special rules are always activated unless a player says otherwise, because they can be waived. That's what some people think. Other people might think that because they're optional, you know, you're always optionally declaring that, and it's self-evident if you're moving out with a camo marker that you're optionally using it, because there's the camo marker. And if you're moving out, well, it's just assume that you're using stealth too, because there's that, or maybe not. Maybe it's just assumed that you're not using it unless you see a position where, oh, yes, okay, I'm using stealth, and you tell your opponent that. But it was important to me here, as we'll see why in a moment. But I said to him, "Are you using stealth?" Now, I can't fault my opponent for this, but his response was that he just wasn't aware that you know, that needed to be declared, or whether the marker state could dispense with it. And the problem with things at that point is that I've already tilted my hand a bit now. The very fact that I'm asking him a question about whether stealth's on or not gives away the fact that I need to know that information for the purposes of a hidden deployment model. So that kind of sucks. But because I need to discuss the rules with him to help us sort of clarify what's going to happen next, at this point I simply have to say to him, hey, look, I mean, the reason I'm raising this is because I've got a hacker there in hidden deployment, and it matters to me as to whether you're using stealth or not. Now, what happens here is he's moving out. I'm declaring a discover with the Overdrawn, because what I wanted to happen is for the HMG to shoot it, and then for the Malignos hacker to declare a hacking attack as a second, as an ARO to the second short skill, but not to the first, because it becomes a surprise. Then it gives me a chance to hack him without a reset, or without him moving on as a marker, and I can't hack him while he's in marker state. Now, my opponent's view on this at the time was that, no, I'm not allowed to suddenly declare a hacking attack with a Malignos as the Swiss Guard appears, because I would have needed to have declared a delay after the first short skill as a marker, and to effectively come out of hidden deployment as a marker, waiting for the Swiss Guard. And in doing so, that would have given him the opportunity to either keep walking, or just to shoot and take it, and that gives him that opportunity. Now, of course, that doesn't work out well for me. I wouldn't have wanted that, because I wouldn't have wanted the Swiss Guard to have eluded the trap. I wouldn't have wanted him to keep walking as a camo marker. So, knowing that I have to delay first, I may not have actually sprung the trap then. I may have just let my guy get shot and then waited for him to keep moving, and then hack him later. So I think you can understand why I was asking, are you using stealth or not? Because if he says, oh, absolutely, I'm using stealth, well, that's great for me, because it means that stealth prevents me from AROing after the first short skill. But when he shoots, as the stealth rules say, I'm now allowed an ARO, because he's doing something which doesn't have stealth, like a BS attack, allowing me to hack him at that point. Here's the really interesting part, though. If he says carefully, look, I just want to make it clear, I'm not using stealth, and the marker's moving over here into line of sight of the Overdrawn. Well, if that's the case, then I know that if I was to do anything with a Malignos there, I'd be putting my cards on the table. I'd be showing my hand. I'd be delaying. I'd be turning into a camo marker. And the Swiss Guard's second short skill, if he's smart, would be to keep moving back out of you know, zone of control, or to somewhere else where he's safe. And the Overdrawn, sure, he gets free discover, but he'd probably fail it, and things move on. But the problem with the situation as it arose during the game, it's not a problem now, but the innocent misunderstanding that took place here is that my opponent was adamant that you know, he didn't want to talk so much about stealth. He was just adamant that I had to delay initially, and that was the end of it. So what I chose to do in that situation was to say, okay, let's, I'd prefer to play it your way. Let's give you the benefit of the doubt. What I will do is I will delay with the Malignos. So what we're doing here is we're just assuming that stealth is always off retrospectively after coming to that conclusion, and the Overdrawn will discover. And what my opponent does here in the actual game, and what happens in this actual instance, is that he keeps moving with the Swiss Guard as a marker to this point. So this photograph of the Swiss Guard being revealed didn't actually occur during the game. It's just that he put the model on the table, and then I decided to hack him, and then we had a discussion about it. Now, I want to make it absolutely clear that no disrespect to my opponent. I don't feel like he's in the wrong or out of line, nor was I trying to create trouble or to you know, to get an advantage in a way that I shouldn't have been. The only problem about the situation is that we hadn't really done the pre-talk about stealth. We hadn't really had previous games or discussions where it needs to be sort of set as a convention that stealth is always on or always off unless you say so. And at the time, my opponent may not have been clear about whether you need to have stealth on or off in order to avoid the delay or not delay and second short skill arrow from a hidden deployment hacker. As I said, have a look at the forums. People put their responses to this very clearly. I think in future, if I could wind back time, if I was to go back into the situation again, I would just simply hold off, wait for the Swiss Guard to reveal, and hack him in a further order later on. Because I wouldn't have wanted to open that bag of worms where we have to talk about, oh, did you intend stealth or not? To avoid that, I would rather be at a little bit of a disadvantage and just hack later and find a better opportunity to spring that trap. So there you have it, guys. Hopefully you understood what was going on, and if not, ask in the video comments. And after this, the game continues. We have an amicable game, no hard feelings. So what's going on here is there is an overdrawn here, taking a photo of it. But again, these are photos which are taken that really didn't really amount to anything that actually happened. We're going to fast forward to a real photo of the game where the Swiss Guard's back in Marcus State. The Malignos is delayed and appeared, and now the Swiss Guard keeps moving so that he cannot be seen anymore, and he's out of the fire lane. So we continue now to my opponent thinking about how he's going to deal about this new turn of events with a threat having been declared and revealed that poses a threat to his Swiss Guard. Note that by raising this issue during the middle of the game, I've given away exactly what trooper I have and everything, what profile it is down to the exact model. So the Locust now moves across. He's got grenades, and his plan here is to throw speculative fire grenades on top of the building in such a way that he can target the Krakot and clip the Malignos in his template. So as he moves over to do this, he ends up failing the first attempt, but after enough throws, he eventually does get a wound on the Malignos, taking it down to unconscious as the Krakot dodges away. So with the hacking threat removed, we can now attack with the Swiss Guard. So the Swiss Guard does appear now, cannot be hacked, fires at the Overdrawn, gets a crit and 2 hits. I pass 2 other armor saves and duck back behind cover, which is the plan all along. I don't really care about losing a wound on the Overdrawn. He's really just there to bait out things like this, so mission accomplished there from the Overdrawn. Here he is ducking back behind cover against the Swiss Guard. In other news, the Locust is throwing a drop bear right in front of the Krakot just to avoid a situation where the Krakot comes and kills him, but the Krakot's probably going to give it a go anyway. The Swiss Guard now decides to decap it. So the Swiss Guard was over here, does move back around here. This is a smart move. I have to commend my opponent for doing this. All too often I see players just leave their models out in the middle of the table, putting up suppression fire, but I'm glad that he realized that he would have lost the Swiss Guard if he'd left them there. Not only that, but the Malignos has an auto med kit, so he might have tried to get back up on his feet. I think that would be a mistake from me, given that he's got Shaz Fasti and he's not giving away points from being unconscious at that point. Really important for the scenario. But I could have moved out with the Anathematic or the Krakot or whatever I would have liked to eventually kill that Swiss Guard. So moving back here and going back into TO Camo is the smart thing to do. Everything else though in suppression fire, so you can see back in deployment, nothing else to do really, so all of these bots back into suppression. Alright, so combined army turn 2. The Krakot, just using Impetuous as normal, doesn't care about the drop bears, moves around. Note that he's physical 14, so on 11 or less he ignores both mines. My opponent chooses to dodge with a Locust rather than attacking, so even more incentive to dodge myself just to clear out the mines and move on, and the Krakot rolls low enough to avoid that, so looking really good. On the top of the building, the Predator now has to move up to the building here and doesn't seem to move into line of sight of the Walker, because the Walker is prone. It's on a lower level from this bridge here, and the bridge railing is blocking him off. So the Predator is okay at that spot. Elsewhere, again, having another go at it, we've got a Q drone which moves around attacking the Walker to try and avoid any future flash pulse. Takes me a couple more attempts, but I eventually kill him. I've been a bit unlucky with this Q drone, but finally the 3-point Walker is removed. In most games though, it just takes one order to get him, but sometimes you get unlucky. The Krakot has moved around, not Krakot, Datrats has moved around the side here. There's no missile launcher threatening that lane anymore, so he's okay for now. So that's Impetuous, and that's the Q drone. On the left-hand side here, the Q drone with assisted fire from the Anathematic moves around to the side of the blue box and is able to shoot at this model in the distance, which is, I think it's just a normal sensor bot, so the Q drone getting the job done there. And removing that particular bot, I believe, wiping out all of its wounds, if I can recall correctly. We now have the Predator, who is situated just on the building so that after just getting to position, it only takes him one short skill to move right down the wall, because he's got climbing plus. So in moving down into close combat, I'm forcing an arrow from my opponent where if he dodges, I might just attack him with the claws, CC-19, or if he attacks me, I might chain rifle. If I'd been in his position here, I would have used the close combat attack, but he chose to dodge. The reason why I think that dodging here was a mistake from him is that if he attacks in close combat, he's got a shock close combat weapon and he hits me automatically on a CC-20, and it gets around dogged. So that means the Predator is not free to carry on to his deployment zone and actually attack things with his chain rifle. Whereas if he dodges, I just face-to-face him with my CC-19 and I have a better chance of actually inflicting a wound, because therefore I can win the face-to-face roll, and that's going to happen more frequently than me beating the dodge and the armor with just a pure chain rifle. So I'm glad that he made that choice, because it made the Predator easier to kill him, and that's exactly what happened. The Predator does kill him, and thankfully this now allows me to complete Extreme Prejudice, because it's just an AP close combat weapon. So now I've got a 2-0 lead in the scenario, and this is what I've been gearing for during this game. I now have to stop him from completing a classified, and I have to stop the margin of points from being too drastic. It's going to be hard for me to sort of, get a 100 or 200 point lead against him in this game, but if I can prevent him from doing the same from me, I can at least play for a draw. What we do now is we move the Predator across. You can see I've put down the ruler, spray template from War Machine, and this model here is a silhouette marker just showing the position of the Predator so that it can use its chain rifle to clip the Swiss Guard and the CSU, but not the HVT. Forcing the Swiss Guard to dodge out of hidden deployment marker state, which it does. The Predator, though, does get shot, and I don't inflict any casualties as a result of this attack, but it was worth it, because I could have actually caused a bit of havoc there. So suppression fire gets me. Now, elsewhere on the table, I see an opening to actually go cause a lot of damage with the Q drone. But upon moving out, after my first short skill, the second short skill takes me into line of sight of this Hexa, which my opponent has been keeping in hidden deployment for just such an occasion. The problem, though, is it's not ideal for the Hexa, is it? Because the Hexa is about 12 to 14 inches away, so it's in the 0 range band for the sniper rifle, and it's up against mimetism, so he's hitting me on a 9 or less. So when I saw this revelation, I was actually quite happy. I was actually quite keen that this happened, because it means that the Hex is not going to be shooting against something else later in the game that it has just a 15 to hit with. And in this case, maybe he missed the shot. So I got a little bit lucky there, but bear in mind he needed a 9 or less on one dice, so there was only a 45% chance of me getting hit, and even had I been hit, there's a small possibility of me passing both armor saves. We've seen it happen before. His missile launcher passed 2 rocket launcher armor saves early in the game. It's definitely doable, but this isn't the worst thing that can happen to you, is to have a Hexa show up in this particular position. But now that he's there, I can't really activate the Q drone, because the Q drone's in the wrong range band as well, and would be up against cover and TO. Well, it's got assisted fire to ignore the cover, but I'm not really liking my odds there. It'll be 11s, it'll be 5s to hit on 4 dice versus 9 to hit on 1 dice. I didn't really want to risk it, so I tried another method instead, and that was for me to get the Datrartsai out. So the Datrartsai is going for it. The Datrartsai's also got a good chance of getting there, because he's hitting the smoke grenade on a 17 against the Hexa hitting on like a 9. And after a couple attempts at this, we both missed the first round. The Datrartsai does put the smoke grenade down. The photo doesn't show it, but there's a smoke grenade up here at the very top of the photo. You can sort of see it there, but it's essentially covering on ground level a place like that, allowing the Krakot, keep calling him the Krakot, the Datrartsai, to get into close combat. Amazingly, though, with the last order of this turn, attacking in close combat with martial arts level 4, doesn't result in the Hexa being destroyed. So that was disappointing that I didn't get that kill, but at least I've tied him up in close combat, so that's something. The Q drone has been moved back behind cover while I've done this, after I've done this, I should say, once I got into the cloud, because a coordinated order could switch their positions effectively. So my opponent now having to move out with his another one of his sensor bots, and he's moving in this direction, and he's able to use triangulated fire, which is quite a cool skill that I didn't actually see in play before, to shoot into close combat. And triangulated fire allows him to ignore mods like mimetism and cover and the close combat bonus, so he can't hit his own Hexa. So after a couple of attempts to get the shots through, eventually does kill the almost called him the Krakot, the Dachuratsi, and succeeds in freeing up that fight. So really good move. Miraculously, his hacker is still alive, so he puts assisted fire on his bot now as well. So you can see the hacker is here, the bot is now moving out in this direction, and it's going to try and go after my Q drone to try and get that kill as well. So the first short skill takes him to here, and the second short skill takes him to around about here once that happens. But as you might be expecting, the Noctifer with missile launcher has been waiting for this moment and fires a missile. And this is a revelation. It's a discovered second short skill arrow, so just 15 to hit, which does hit. 3 armor saves, and the bot is gone. So happy to get an opportunity to use the missile launcher, and now he sees that this fire lane is not really the best fire lane to walk onto. And we've got a Noctifer there, but he's got a lot of orders. So on the same flank, or the opposite, the same flank as the Noctifer, moving out with the auxiliary team. So moving in this direction, of course, just under the corpse of the poor old Malignos. So moving in that direction, able to stay out of line of fire of the missile launcher for now. And the plan is to get them to come around the corner here and fire a flamethrower at the Noctifer. Trying to get past the Dachuratsi as they do that. So moving in here. Now the first short skill, the Auxilia stays back, and it's only the Auxbot that moves out. Initially it wasn't in range of the Noctifier, so the Noctifier fires a missile at the bot and misses. The Krakot tries to engage him and fails. So that was kind of crappy. And then the Auxbot now continues on moving. The Noctifer fails the dodge check, fails the armor save, does pass the second armor save, and goes unconscious. Very useful for Shazvasti's state. And now the Krakot engages the Auxbot. So again, a little bit unlucky for me to either not hit with the missile or dodge with the Noctifer. So that's a shame. But these things do happen. That's okay. And because he's moved within range of a repeater now, my lieutenant uses some sort of carbonite to stop the Auxbot. Alright, unfortunately though, he's able to move around with his Auxilia and shoot bullets at the R-drone, which fires a flash pulse, loses the face-to-face roll, but passes the armor save, and then dodges, gutses back into cover. This allows my opponent to fire his Auxilia at the unconscious Noctifer to remove him. During this game, I did say to him, look, these models do have Shazvasti, just to remind you. I don't like to be that player that at the end of the game says, aha, by the way, I had Shazvasti, so you didn't actually kill the 60 to 70 points worth of models between those two unconscious tokens. So I'm sure he was probably aware of that anyway, but even had he not been, I think that's the more sporting thing to do. So he took advantage of that by shooting at the unconscious corpse and removing it from the table to net those points, which was the right thing to do. Okay, so he has been stunned though, because the second attempt to do that seems to have caused a flash pulse to actually hit him when he goes after the R-drone again. At least that's what I think happens, so we'll skip that photo. But now we have a Garuda with Spitfire showing up. And the job of the Garuda, I think the job of the Garuda was to actually take out the Shazvasti guy and then try and get in position to do some other attacks. He fires into close combat, nailing both the Auxbot and the Dachuratsi, so removes that model as well. And that's what he's accomplished there. He is able to pull back a bit and go into suppression fire, so just setting up that flank rather nicely. In my turn, and final turn, I looked at it very carefully and thought, well, what if the Unidron attacks here? The Unidron can shoot at the Auxilia, and the plasma impacts will hit the Garuda. But if I do that, I'll need to line of sight of the Garuda, and the Garuda is going to shoot me at long range suppression. So the Garuda's Blister skill 12, I think. he will be up against cover and long range, so 6s to hit on 3 dice, but it will be a face-to-face roll against the Unidrons hitting on 14s on 2 dice. So long as I roll some decent numbers, I'm probably going to beat him on the face-to-face roll with the impact hits, and Auxilia is shooting back with 11 on 1 dice. So I decided it was worth going for, because I could have netted both models there. What I did do there is moved out, shot them, and didn't get any hits, and the Unidron just dies, so no success there. I did have a think for a while about moving the Anathematic around, doing the same thing with the Anathematic, who has got a greater chance of accomplishing that because of TO Camo on BS13, but I didn't want to do that either because it would have been a bit order intensive and I had other things to do with my turn. Namely this, so it's the last combined army turn. I've now got my Dr. Worm model moving to the HVT. Now, it doesn't say anywhere in the rulebook or HSN3, but the FAQ, and especially the wiki, informs us that the case-fac rule can be applied to civilians, and the HVT model is a civilian. So this allows me to use case-fac, assuming I'm not like an Impetrus model or something, to move the HVT. And the significance of this is that he hasn't completed his classified yet. He's got one more turn to do it. And if he does have a difficult classified to accomplish, he can just move over to take my HVT and the game is a draw. But if I move my HVT into a corner where it's harder for him to get there, especially getting through a Q-drone and an Overdron and a Shrouded Hacker, that might become impossible for him. So the Dr. Worm picks up our friend there and moves him away. And that takes quite a few orders, but he does get into the corner of the table. And then, as a last act, the Anathematic moves a very short distance, enough to shoot at the Auxilia around here, and destroys him. Not the Garuda, though. And then, of course, we go back prone, we go back into TO Camo, because I definitely don't want to lose the Anathematic at any point, because he's worth so many points. So, my opponent's last turn, it gets on top of a building with his Swiss Guard HMG. Moves around here, tries to get line of sight to the Krakot, eventually crosses the bridge and gets him to kill him with the HMG. The silhouette of the Anathematic's in the distance, but he's prone behind a wall, so cannot be seen. And as the Swiss Guard moves over here, takes advantage of being able to remove the Shazvasti corpse with a coup de grace and gets rid of him as well. And then goes back into TO Camo. We've got a Spitfire Diva moving out now to try and get line of sight to the Overdron. Does have a go at it, so he comes up the stairs here and fires at the Overdron, which is hiding here. To net the points for that, he needs to get 2 wounds through, and he's up against Armor 9 and the Rocket's 13. The first face-to-face roll, we both rolled an 11, so nothing happens. And the second face-to-face roll, I managed to hit and kill him. Even with 2 wounds, the flame just burns through him and he dies. And that's basically the end of the game, because he's got nothing left that he can do, and I've got my HVT situated in a corner where he can't get to me. Now, it turned out later that he said that he had retro engineering, I think it was, where you have to actually get an engineer to the HVT, so that's why he couldn't accomplish it. And in terms of army points left, I had about 240, he had about 260, so he'd done a little bit more, but I wasn't pushing to have more than him, I was just pushing to have less than a 100 point gap, which I succeeded in doing. I just want to say a quick thing about luck in this game. This last activation here, where he's lost his Diva, so there's a little bit of a swing of points, was unlucky. Even if he had killed the Overdron, I'm not too sure if that would have allowed him to win. He would have needed to get 2 wounds. If just wounding him once wouldn't have been enough there. So I would have had between 100 and 200 points left. So I'd have had 1 objective points. He'd have had 3 objective points of that. So it would have been a margin of 2. And yeah, so he would have managed to win if he'd actually wiped out the Overdron. But chances are the Overdron would have only taken 1 wound and then guts back behind cover, so he would have been safe. My opponent got lucky to lose that Diva, though. I just want to say, though, that there are the number of other things that went badly for me. I attacked his Orc spot at the start of the game with the Overdron and didn't kill the missile launcher. The Predator had a go at it, but failed to actually crack the armor on the Hacker, or I think his Flashpole spot. I wasted about 6 orders trying to kill a Walker and didn't kill that either. So there are a number of things that didn't go well for me. He missed a shot with a Hexer against the the Q drone, but that's about it. In terms of luck, I don't think luck had a big favor to one side or the other, if I'm to be honest. But we got to the end of the game, and I'm not too sure if I've managed to convince anybody that Annihilation is more about the classified and more about playing a cagey game and sometimes playing for a draw than it is about wiping out your opponent. But that's how I feel about the mission, and I think that Firefight is a superior mission to Annihilation. And I do like missions that incorporate an objective where you get 1 point for killing more models than the other guy, but there are other objectives to complete as well, which are meaningful, like pressing buttons. So that's how I feel about that. Also, hopefully you guys learned a bit more about stealth and optional versus automatic rules, or optional and automatic rules, and marker state and hacking. Hopefully that makes a bit of sense. A lot of people are saying that stealth is one of the most poorly designed rules in this game at the moment. Reason being that there are more situations in which you don't want to use stealth than there are in which you do want to use stealth. There are so many cases where you want to be able to trigger some sort of arrow from your opponent so that you can waste their arrow before moving on to your second short skill, which will actually be very meaningful. So I haven't been happy with that, and a lot of people also aren't. I'd be interested to see how Infinity would play if the rules were different, where if something moves into your zone of control and you don't have line of sight to it, you have to delay. And if they move into your line of sight and you have line of sight to them, you can only delay if you have 6 sense level 1. So that would be a way to get around the shenanigans where people move into a smoke template with MSV2 and force you to waste your arrow and they shoot you to death, or with hacking situations where you have to switch stealth on or off and things like that. So I'd be interested to see how Infinity plays if that was the case, but we do have a rule set that we're stuck with, I think, at the moment. Hope you guys enjoyed this. I think I better leave it there. The game, I think the objective points were 8-6 in favor of Combined Army. It was a solid game. I felt like I played pretty well, but it would have been cool to have played a different mission. I think this mission left some things to be desired. I was expecting a draw and was surprised when I managed to net the win. Thanks for watching, guys.